Hi there, I'm David Hunt, owner of GameMasters Guild, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of The Art of the Master. In this episode, I'm going to help you generate ideas for your campaigns. Specifically, we're going to do some brainstorming, and I'm going to show you how I go through my process of brainstorming and coming up with ideas for my campaigns. Now, before I get too deep in this episode, I want to say that a campaign is really as long as you want it to be. If you want to do what's typically called a one-shot, and it's just a single evening, a single session, where you start it and you end it on the same evening, that's fine. If you want it to last a couple of nights, that's okay too. But typically, a campaign will usually last anywhere from 8 to 10 sessions if it's a shorter campaign. If it's a longer campaign, it can last on average once a week for anywhere from 6 months to years. So you have to decide exactly how long you want to run for. What length is your campaign going to be? Are you going to do a one-shot, a mini adventure, or a full-blown campaign? Now, if you decide you want a full-blown campaign and it all goes sideways, that's okay. You can always just drop it any time, or you can shorten it. Not a problem. With a mini campaign, you're kind of on either end. You can sit there and shorten it up if you have to, or you can make it longer. And if you're doing a one-shot and you're really enjoying it, but you don't have any other material, not to worry. You're going to be able to brainstorm some more stuff and take that one-shot into a full-blown campaign if you want to. So now, let's talk about a little bit more about how I brainstorm. Brainstorming campaign ideas, for me, has become relatively easy over the years, and it gets easier and easier the more I do it. And that's like anything else. If you practice it, pretty soon it becomes easier. And I try not to stress myself out and try too hard. I don't sit down and write out a full-blown epic novel that's going to be my campaign. Even on the really big adventures that I've had really big ideas and I ran for a couple years, I got to tell you, I had a strong idea how it's going to start, which is going to encompass the first half a dozen sessions. And a session is a single night's worth of play, be it 1 hour or 8 hours. And my ending is typically very strong, which is the last 3 or 4 sessions. And the middle kind of spikes to really great parts and dives low to really lame parts, because inevitably it's going to happen. It's hard to run full tilt all the time. Now, I've had some games where it's just been spot on from start to finish. But generally, I've noticed that in order to maintain this kind of quality, I have to have a slightly shorter campaign. Now, not necessarily just a one-shot, and I tell you, on a one-shot, you can really bang out something really great, and everybody's going to have a good time and going to be talking about it afterwards. But now a mini campaign, something that lasts anywhere from 6 to 12 sessions, 8 to 10 sessions, right there, that's a pretty nice size, because you can really have a strong vision, have some side adventures that break off but yet still relate to the main plot, and you can tie it up nice and neat at the end with a real good strong ending. Mini campaigns, I tell you, that's where they're at. Shorter campaigns, I really like it. Now, sometimes I gotta admit, my shorter campaigns usually tend to be a little more than 10 sessions. You're probably looking like 20 sessions, give or take. And 20 sessions, that's 5 months. That's a lot of gaming. But that's not too bad. Let's look at the one-shot. The one-shot is a one-night adventure where you have an idea of where they start and you have a strong idea where they end, and the middle is so short that there's not too much opportunity for players to go off the beaten path. And especially since they know it's a one-shot, there's not too much reason for them to explore other avenues. Now, in a one-shot, players can make their own characters and bring them to the table, but ideally, you want to pre-generate those characters so you know exactly what's going to be happening within that one-shot. That way, your one-shot isn't derailed by a character with certain abilities that turns your 4-hour one-shot into a 30-minute one-shot. Now, there's ways around that too, but we won't worry about that in this episode. Now, I noticed after running one-shots in my store for 2 years straight, once a week, I noticed that even the weakest ideas, the weakest beginnings, the weakest endings for a one-shot, once you sit down at the table and start playing, man, they get a life of their own, and I actually have very little trouble pulling off a one-shot. You'd be surprised. I've had the worst day ever with the weakest ideas, and somehow I managed to pull out just some of the best adventures, the best games that I've ever had. Why is that? That's because the length of the one-shot. The one-shot is so short that there's not much time for players to veer off the beaten path. Sure, you've got your wild cards, but generally speaking, most players, they're generally trying to follow the plot. And if they're interested in it, they're going to play it. And one night is pretty easy to keep everybody hooked, for sure. And one-shots, I'm really impressed at how easy it is to do a one-shot. You really have to work really, really hard to totally screw up a one-shot. You literally have to throw it away and not care about running a role-playing game in order to mess up a one-shot. And inevitably, in a one-shot, there's always going to be some kind of combat 99% of the time. Not always, but players tend to enjoy action, so usually there's going to be some kind of combat, and that can easily run a solid hour out of the 4 hours or 5 that you may be running a one-shot. So that's just something to keep in mind. And the more combats you have, the more time it's going to take. Even if you have 2 or 3 combats during a session, and say that's only 30 minutes, if you have 4 players, that's, what about 7 or 8 minutes per player in combat? I mean, that is kind of slow, but still, you get the idea. You can eat up a lot of time with combat in a single evening. Now, if you've been in any role-playing game playing, you know that sometimes combat can take a long time. So I think that's why one-shots are a really good place to start, because generally speaking, the players don't have a lot of time to go off script, to go off the rails, and they're just trying to get straight to the end of the adventure, and you're just trying to get them there. So everybody's kind of on the same path, which is nice. Now, looking at the mini campaign or the shorter campaigns, you've got a campaign that lasts anywhere from 6 to 12 sessions, 8 to 10 sessions. Will put you right around the target about 5 months. Even if you have a really strong idea of how it begins and a really strong idea how it ends, sometimes the middle, well, because it's so spread out, some days you're not going to have a good day, other days you're going to have a great day, which in turn, the sessions are going to vary between really good to not really good at all. And that's just how it's going to happen. Sometimes you're not all in, other nights you're completely all in. And you want to try your best that when you do run, that you are kind of all in the game, or at least do your best. If you're having a bad day, push it away and just focus on the game and having fun and getting the players some fun. But inevitably, don't feel bad. You're going to screw up. You're going to have weak days. It just happens. But you know what? More often than not, my players usually don't notice those days. I notice them more than my players ever do. I might have a player say, hey, you didn't seem like you were quite your best, but you were sick under the weather, but man, you ran a great game that night. I was like, I did? I thought that was horrible. Or I'll mention certain events or certain aspects of the game or certain side adventures that I thought were just lame or bad. I was like, man, I didn't have nothing that night. I just pulled that out of my butt. And my player's like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's different being on the other side of the screen. And then, of course, you've got the longer campaign that lasts for anywhere from 6 months to years. And that right there is where I've noticed my games will suffer, because it's so long and I'm trying to achieve so much and get to this end plot point, this main idea. Players can lose interest when I have these long games and they go off kind of on side tangents that I don't want them to go down, or I come up with stuff that seems interesting to me at the moment but starts to lead away from what I have planned out. And also, too, sometimes with a longer game, it's harder to stay interested in the game for both, not just the players, but the DM as well. And it just happens from time to time. Sometimes I've felt for weeks not into a certain game, but I watch some TV, I get a good night's rest, I eat right, and I get a good meal in me at least, and then things are better. So just kind of keep these things in mind as we talk about brainstorming. Now, I'm actually going to get to the brainstorming part right now, which is what you've been waiting for. So for me, I brainstorm constantly, always in the back of my mind. I don't actively do it, but it's always there because I'm just used to doing it. It's like driving. When you're driving down the road, if you've been driving for any amount of time, you're just automatically doing it. But you're talking to a friend, you answer the phone, which you probably shouldn't, eating, which you probably shouldn't, you're playing with your radio, you're driving, carrying on a conversation, singing your favorite song, but you're driving the car in the background. Or you're doing all these activities in the background of driving the car, and you really don't think about it. So same with brainstorming for role-playing games. Whenever I get an idea that I want to run a game, I want to decide on the genre. Am I running science fiction? Am I running fantasy? Do I want to do a steampunk game? Do I want to do some kind of horror? Or wait, survival horror? Wait, am I going to cross genres? Do I want to do horror and science fiction? Maybe some kind of horror in space. Oh, hey, that sounds good. Do I want to do a zombie apocalypse or a regular apocalypse or some kind of weird supernatural apocalypse? What do I want to do? There's so many options, so many choices. So once I get an idea of a general game that I want to run, I got an idea, and I decide that's what I'm going to do. I tell my players, hey guys, I'm going to give myself some time, but in about maybe a month or two, I'm going to run a game based on the zombie apocalypse. I need about 4 or 5 people who are interested, and I'm going to run it. So I tell my players, and I tell them this, like I said, months in advance, so they can anticipate the game, and they can get excited about it and start looking at whatever books that I'm going to be running the game out of. And that's very important. That way your players themselves are getting excited, they're talking about amongst themselves, maybe coming up with their own character connections or ideas about the game that you can feed off of. Inevitably, someone will ask you questions and be like, well, can I have a fire truck? Can I be a fireman? Can I still be a jet pilot? What if I pick a jet pilot? You know, you're going to be able to incorporate that in the game, or is it going to be pointless for me to be a jet pilot? You know, and these ideas right here, a jet, why would you jet? Why gives me some interesting ideas, something we could do. That's cool. Now, not to say that the players have to have access the whole time to some kind of jet during the zombie apocalypse, but it gives you some interesting options and gives them something to strive for. If they don't have an aircraft, they're going to go try and find one. Why? Because they have a pilot who can fly a jet. Do any of your scenarios have to be incredibly realistic about them finding a jet and getting a jet in a zombie apocalypse? No. Is it fun? Yeah. So I focus on stuff like that, little bits of information that the players give me and the questions they ask make me think about possible scenarios in the game. I've heard a lot of game masters just say, oh, I wouldn't start them with that. That's far too powerful. Too powerful? What is too powerful? Nothing is too powerful for the dungeon master in a role-playing game. If you run a role-playing game, there's nothing a player can do or make character-wise in a game world that the game master cannot overcome, because you are the entire universe. Well, my players are overpowered. Well, throw some overpowered monsters in there. Well, they can just survive that scenario. Give them a scenario they can't survive. You know, think about the players. Don't be rigid. Don't be rigid. Explore the universe. You are everything in a role-playing game when you're the game master. You are literally everything. Without you, the players don't know what the world even looks like, what it smells like, what it sounds like, what dangers there are. They don't even know if their character likes something when they eat it. Remember that. You are everything. So now, I have this idea pitched out to the players. They're thinking about it. I say about a couple months. And the reason why I give myself a wide time frame is that way it gives me plenty of time to think without stress about how I want to run my science fiction game or my zombie apocalypse game. It gives me plenty of time to think without being stressed out and having to write a book overnight. Now, in the back of my mind, I'm always going to be thinking about the zombie apocalypse. I'm going to take some notes. I'm going to write stuff down whenever it hits me. And whenever I'm watching anything on TV, it doesn't matter if it's a documentary, if it doesn't matter if it's real life news, it doesn't matter if I'm watching a fantasy movie, it doesn't matter if I'm watching something science fiction. I'm going to watch it, and inevitably at some point, I'm going to go, that's interesting. I wonder how I could incorporate that situation in whatever movie I'm seeing into a zombie apocalypse game. Well, that's very interesting. Or I'll be out driving and I'll see like a big box store or a gas station, or I'll see a car accident, or I'll drive by a water tower and I'm thinking, if there was a zombie apocalypse and I was stuck at that water tower, what would it be like? What would I be doing? Why would I be up there? Was it on purpose? Is it not on purpose? What would I do? Or if I'm watching, let's say, a zombie apocalypse movie, which generally, if you're getting ready to run a certain kind of genre, like let's say you're trying to do a survival horror game or a zombie apocalypse game or a science fiction game, you're going to want to watch those kinds of movies. Now, you don't have to binge watch them because you don't want to overload and fry your brain, but you definitely want to watch these kind of movies for inspiration. And something else I've been recently in the habit of doing is I'll get online and I'll randomly pull up short films. I'll type into the search bar horror short films or science fiction fan films, and you'd be surprised at how many are out there. Some kind of bad, some kind of mediocre, some are really good. And even the ones that don't blow my socks off, typically they have very interesting ideas and concepts. And with these smaller fan films, that's what intrigues me, is some of these interesting ideas and concepts that they present that you just gotta turn your head and go, what did I just see? I'm not quite sure if I get that. Or I don't even know why they even made this film. But the concept inside of it is kind of interesting, but they didn't elaborate enough on it. But then, of course, a lot of times these small films are made like that, so you can think about it. And I like doing that. I like watching these small films and incorporating those ideas. And don't be worried about being original. I mean, you want to be original on some level. You know, don't just literally pull out Lord of the Rings and say, hey guys, your old wizard buddy says you have a ring and points it out to you and says you guys got to go throw it away in a volcano because the only place that you guys can get rid of this evil magic ring, and now you need to get a team to go and, oh, stop right there. You can do Lord of the Rings, just don't do Lord of the Rings. You can easily take Lord of the Rings, or any other movie for that matter, and redress it very, very simply, or throw some complexity into it, whatever you like, and make it your own. Maybe the players are tasked by someone to, I don't know, deliver something to another kingdom. So they do, and everything's fine. They have a little misadventures, some battles, it's okay. And then they're at that kingdom where everything seems fine. A seemingly background character comes up, talks about this prophecy, and kind of freaks out one of the players because it's kind of directed towards them. And then later come to find out, maybe after a few more side adventures, that someone comes to them and say, hey, look, man, I've got this item. It's cursed, and we've got to get rid of it. And it doesn't have to be like a world-ending thing. Nothing in your campaign or one-shot has to be world-ending. Try to stay away from that. It's fun to do those, but don't do them all the time because then they become boring. Plus, it lessens the impact of smaller things that happen within your game, if you're not careful. So they get a magic item, and they say they have to do all these things to go dispose of it. So maybe they have to, for whatever reason, to conceal its magical aura, they have to go through a deep, dark, canyon. Not necessarily underground. Don't do the Mines of Moria, but maybe just something like the Grand Canyon. Maybe you have to traverse through this Grand Canyon. Maybe they have to do that for whatever reason. It masks the magical signature, or is to avoid these wandering tribes on top of in the desert. I don't know. Just whatever you come up with, right? So it's Lord of the Rings-esque, but it's a little different because you can describe these canyons, these straight walls, there's water running through. Sometimes they have to boat through it. Sometimes they can walk down it, and it's just a little trickle. They can look up and still see the night sky. It's definitely very, very different. And then perhaps you get to a point to where you're getting towards the end of the adventure, and they're excited because they're getting ready to get there and get rid of this cursed magic item. And then when they get to a certain point, come to find out they meet somebody who can aid them. And then he says, oh, wait, someone told you about a prophecy? Hang on. Oh, no, it's not this sword. Yes, this sword is cursed, and we have to destroy it. And I can do that, but I won't actually destroy it. I can actually remove the curse, and you can still use it, and it will aid you on your quest. Oh, sweet! But that's not the actual meaning of the prophecy. The prophecy is you, whoever's burying the magic item. You're actually the one that causes this great death and destruction down the road. It's unclear as to how this happens, but you are the one that must meet your untimely demise in order to prevent this prophecy from happening. And that's going to throw everybody sideways. What do you mean? Why? I don't know. Even I don't know right now. I don't even know on this Lord of the Rings redress why that would possibly be or what it means for the players. But I just came up with it. And I tell you, if I pull that on my players and they're freaking out, they don't know, I just sit there behind the screen and smile. And any question they ask, I'm like, well, it's a vague prophecy. You're not sure. You don't know. But I'm not going to tell them that I don't know. Oh, no, 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 no. No, absolutely not. Because when you're behind the screen, you're not the player. You're the dungeon master. And you're the master of everything. And when you're behind that screen, you need to be the master of bluffing. Oh, just a wry smile like, yep. Or a simple shrug of shoulders. Your character doesn't know, I'm sorry. It's just knowledge he doesn't have. And some players, they'll balk at this and say, well, I'm going to make a skill check, a history check, and I got a 20. Man, that's going to be great. Or I've got a modified 30, or I rolled perfectly. I rolled the best I could possibly get. Because sometimes that happens. Sometimes players do crazy things and you say they want to do stuff that's, almost impossible, and you say, go ahead and roll for it. And they roll, jeez, and it's just like the gods favor them and they get the perfect roll. But remember, sometimes if the information's not there, the information's just not there. Now, you could give them some tidbits and say, well, you did roll, man, that's an amazing roll, and you do know some information that will help you on your quest. Man, if players get a good roll or they do something great, still reward them, you don't want to completely blow it off, say, look, unfortunately, there's not enough in the lore or the history to really help you too much with this particular situation, although you do find that there's some things that could aid you. There's a certain location that if you go to, you're going to find some assistance on this journey. And what's nice is by the time they travel to that location, or maybe it's the end of the night by the time you make this reveal, a lot of times you have a week in between sessions to come up with something. And to be perfectly honest, even though I've been running for decades, I mean, geez, I've been running stuff since like the 6th grade. I don't even want to know how many decades that was ago. But I gotta tell you, a lot of my games, even though I have a strong start and a strong end in the middle, I'm typically running session from session. And why? Because, well, life gets in the way. And sometimes you don't always have that time to plan. And even with ideas and notes jotted down, I can't account for everything. And sometimes I don't like how the game is going, so I have to tweak it slightly behind the scenes so the players don't know. And sometimes if you sense what's happening with your players and they're not digging it, sometimes you have to still go behind the scenes and tweak it so the players can enjoy that game. So don't be worried if you don't seem like you have any ideas. Trust me, you will get more ideas. So that's just a quick idea of how I brainstorm. And I just kind of pulled something out real fast, off the cuff, and I just thought of that out of nowhere. And don't think for a minute that you can't be creative, that you can't do that. I mean, being Dungeon Master is super easy. All you got to do is tell the players where they are, what they see, and what happens next. If you are not sure about what happens next in your game or what's going to happen to the players in a certain situation, you know what I like to do? I'll think about, well, let's say a fantasy setting. I'm in a tavern, and then I'm thinking, well, if I was really there and I envisioned myself there, what could happen? What could happen to me there? That could be adventurous. What could happen in the tavern to lead me to adventure? So there's always the classic, someone could come in and ask for help. Maybe the bartender asks for help. Maybe one of the wenches asks for help. Maybe one of the tables with some other patrons there, maybe they ask you for help. Maybe you're there because you need help. You're injured, you're low on money. Maybe you're looking for a job. Maybe the table's a mimic. Maybe the whole inn and tavern itself actually preys on travelers and they think you're weak. And when does that happen? When do they try to mug you? When do they try to take your stuff? Do they just close the door and outright try to do it? Do they subtly try to do it? Do they steal stuff when you're away? Do they try to kill you in your sleep at night? Or is it someone else who's doing that, who's preying on the tavern, and the tavern has a notorious reputation, and the tavern owner wants your help in shedding this reputation, figuring out who is messing up his reputation. Is it a competitor? Is it just someone who thinks that people there at that tavern are an easy mark? Maybe the tavern owner, maybe he needs more security. Maybe you're the one to provide it. There are so many ideas. Maybe the tavern is built on a dungeon. Maybe there's a bar fight and the floor breaks, some weak floorboards break, a couple people fall down, and it's an entrance to a dungeon. There are so many possibilities. There are really so many possibilities. And these things just kind of get your mind going. And that's the kind of things you want to do. You want to come up with these ideas and scenarios. And I sometimes, and actually I say a lot of times, these ideas, I don't think of the start of the campaign and I'm completely going through and thinking it scene by scene and play by play and night by night at how it's going to lay out. Not often. Not often at all. A lot of times I see stuff that's way ahead in the campaign, little scenes that I think would be cool to interject into my campaign. Or I might come up with something really strong in the beginning, but not know too much about what's going to happen in the middle. But at the end, or right near the end, I want this one really cool thing to happen to punctuate what's about to happen at the very end of the big boss fight. So one of these scenes that I wanted to, so I try to take scenes from movies and television, and sometimes I want to take certain scenes and just interject that one scene into my game, just because I want to see it in my game. And it might last only 15 minutes. A good example, I hope I got my movies right, but I believe this happened in Star Trek 6. It was either 3 or 6. I'm pretty sure it was Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. So Kirk and them are on the Enterprise, and Chang's warbird can fire while invisible. So it shoots them, and just in a knee-jerk reaction, Kirk goes, "Back off, back off, back off! Just back off!" And Helm hits the controls, and the Enterprise backs directly away from the warbird's position. And General Chang is like, "What? Do they see us? Well, why did he back straight away? That's very weird." It causes him pause. And then on the bridge of the Enterprise, Kirk is like, "What happened? Why'd he stop firing?" And Spock says, "Well, I don't know, but maybe it has something to do with the action we just took, wondering why we did such a deliberate action in one direction. Perhaps we know approximately where he's at." Something to that effect. And I wanted to do that in my game. I basically just wanted to have one of my players go, "Back off, back off, back off," and pull the ship to back away. I don't know why. I just thought it would be kind of cool. And I did that in a Star Frontiers game that I ran. And it was really cool. It was really fun. I had a good time. It was only like a little, it's really like 5 minutes. I just want to have that scene. I was so happy. And after that had happened, after that night we played, and I told my players, I said, "Man, I got to tell you, I saw this in a movie, that scene in a movie, and I wanted to play out in my game, and I was hoping it would, and I couldn't believe it, but it ran perfectly. I was so excited." And that little 5-minute scene carried me. Oh my gosh, man. Unfortunately, that short sci-fi game we were running, we didn't get a chance to finish it due to scheduling conflicts. But it was just so cool. And it's neat when you get those little tidbits in there that make you excited, because then your players can get excited about it too. Well, now, what else can we brainstorm? Let's take a look at that. Now, of course, you can always brainstorm about what your plot's going to be, how it's going to start. Remember, a lot of things can happen where they start. They don't have to go on this grand adventure. It should be a grand adventure. It should be an epic adventure. They should always have a good time. There should always be, fun and exciting. And sometimes it's not going to be, but it should be. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. So how else can we brainstorm? What else can we brainstorm? I like to brainstorm characters. And in my previous video of The Art of the Master, I told you that I don't like it when NPCs are out to get everybody. Nope. I have a lot of NPCs that are neutral to the players, and a lot of NPCs, and it requires a little more work on my part, that are helpful to the player characters, and some that end up with strong attachments to the other players. Not necessarily romantic, but good strong friendships and good reliable NPCs. And these NPCs, I make sure the players can go to in a time of need, or sometimes these NPCs travel with them. Again, more work on your part, and you have to be consistent about those NPCs, but it's totally well worth it, especially when you see your players naturally start to relate or attach themselves to certain NPCs because you've made them strong. Basically, just be consistent, and that's going to go it's going to go miles, I tell you. Also, too, you can brainstorm villains and brainstorm why villains do what it is that they do. Is it just because they're evil? Do they just go around stabbing people in town? Or is it more subtle? You know, are they buying up all the property in town and jacking up the prices? And that's evil? Is it? But it could be when most of the town is poor and destitute and they don't have any money. But is it the kind of evil the players want to go up against? I don't know. It depends. Depends on maybe if that general nastiness of that NPC to create all those high rates and to make the town generally poor, and the guy literally owns the whole town, you could say, practically. Maybe that creates another dilemma, another problem, where another evil is moved in because there's so much destitution. So it's very different. Do they just run and go stab the guy and make things better? I don't know. There's a lot of complexity there, I think. It seems like that they could just do that, but I don't know. A guy like that, he's going to be powerful, he's going to be rich, he's going to have guards. I mean, maybe that's something you want to delve into. Not every evil wizard is an evil wizard. Maybe an evil wizard is just a regular wizard doing experiments and, oops, hey, I let something loose. Can you guys go scour the countryside for me and kill these 5 or 6 things I think I accidentally let into the countryside? There's lots of different ideas you can think about. Now, non-playing characters in general, not just villains, but the general non-playing characters, the neutral ones to the ones that are more attached to the players, to the ones that maybe don't like the players but aren't necessarily evil or bad guys. There's a lot of potential for role-playing, a lot of potential for connections, a lot of potential to literally have a night's adventure wrapped around an NPC or two. And it could be as simple as a man comes to you and says, hey, I'm glad to see you guys are back in town. You should come to my house and have a big dinner. And the players have met him before. And like, oh, yeah, sure. They go back to have a big dinner. And then right at the end of the dinner, he says, well, I invited you here for dinner because, it's good to see you guys again. But also, I was wondering if you could help me out. Something's killing all my cattle. And without them, I can't make any money. And in fact, this lavish dinner is the last of the money that I had. And I was hoping that maybe, because of our history, maybe you'd help me out if you could find it in your power to do so. And the players, I can't turn that down, especially if they've already met the guy and talked to him before and had interactions with it. So they're gonna. And I had this kind of scenario one time, and it was some boulettes that were eating their cattle. And of course, I strung it out. They would find bodies, they would hear noises, they would find cow bodies, and they would find small holes in the ground. And like, where do these holes go? But they weren't very big, because a boulette's a pretty big creature. I can't remember the exact size. It's either a large or huge creature. It's pretty good, but they kept finding all these little holes, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. They could never catch the creature above ground. So they didn't have an idea what it was. The farmer didn't know, and the players didn't know, but it was boulettes. So, and I say that multiple, and I'll tell you why. So eventually the player's like, well, and I think there was something that happened where there was a smaller creature that they were investigating. They heard some sounds. They went out to investigate, and a smaller creature attacked them and bit them while it was dining on one of the cows, and it ran off, and they couldn't kill it. Like, what was that? And they made a roll, and I said, well, give me a roll. And even no matter how well of a skill check they made, they couldn't determine what it was they just saw. Why was that? That's because I determined that they didn't have enough experience knowing the life cycle of a boulette, so they wouldn't recognize a baby boulette even if they saw it. They wouldn't have any idea, especially in a fantasy world with so many different creatures. They're not going to know. So I said, well, it's definitely some kind of burrowing creature. You get the feeling that because you don't see it anymore, you don't see it run off very far, so maybe it's a burrowing creature. You should probably look for some kind of burrow or passage into the ground. And they started looking around, and they found one. And it was just big enough for them to go in as medium creatures and to kind of squeeze in that space. So they squeezed in that space, and they started going, and there was they come to find out they found a couple of these holes, and the players split up and dived down in there and started crawling around. And they described the tightness and everything, and every now and then they'd find some gooey blood and cattle organs and stuff. And they're medium creatures squeezing into a small space. So that made it kind of difficult, and I made sure to stress that, and they were moving half speed. So they weren't liking that too much because they know they couldn't readily get away. And sometimes, some of the dirt would come down, or I'd make them do a dex check or something like that, or it would partially collapse, and I'd have to have them dig their way out. Nothing super dangerous, but just enough to be like, what? Oh, the tunnel collapses. Give me a strength check. Give me a con check. Knowing that they're going to get out, or knowing that, like I might say, if a player fails his con check, let's say it's like, oh my gosh, he's going to suffocate. And then suddenly I just automatically say, and so grabs you and pulls you out because he makes his check. Oh, but it's still all in the presentation, how I present it, just little snippets of potential danger, and then I pull them out real quick. And then they keep going, and they find this open area, this underground open area. And what it is there's two bullets, a dead male and a heavily wounded female. Now, at the level the players were when they found this bullet, come to find out that the bullets were a mated pair, and they had just gotten done mating not too long ago. The male died because in the mating, after mating, the female kills the male. And then after that, she has the babies, and then they all go out and they start to feed, and they all go out on their own. And so, of course, when the female bullet sees them, immediately attacks them, and they fight. And, of course, the bullet, eventually they defeat the bullet, but also, too, I said that the bullet was so injured that it didn't have all the hit points that it would normally have because it's been severely wounded and it's recovering over several days to get back to full health. And I thought this was pretty reasonable and gave them a weak creature to fight, something they could defeat and help this farmer out and still make it very adventurous and very awesome. And that's another thing too. I will just take and grab my books of the game I'm going to run, and I'll scour and flip through those books just for ideas. I'll reread the backgrounds of certain monsters. I won't flip to a monster and go, I'm going to use that and read it. I'm just going to flip through and read a couple random things about the monsters, or read through the player's handbook, read some of the sections that I don't normally read or have time to read, just to get some ideas. And you'd be surprised at how much you come up with. And remember, when it comes to combat, because that's a big portion of it, to do something interesting, not everybody's always going to fight to the death, and I think I said that before in a previous video, but also too, in the case of the farmer with the bullets, they've actually jumped in and right in the middle of the cycle of life, and I made it very real because it was a mated pair, and the youngins went out and were preying on the cattle while the female was in a weakened state, and potentially maybe she was even dying too. Never got that far into it. The players don't know enough about bullets and their physiology and stuff, and they're not going to be sitting, their adventures, they're not at the library researching every single thing about every single creature out there. They're just not. So, and it felt very real, and players still recount that, and they really enjoyed that session with the bullets. And I really had a good time doing it because something really different. It could have been something really big and nasty. I mean, for them it was, but it could have been something darker. It could have been connected to a bigger plot that I had, but I didn't. It was a little side adventure, and I found it was really fun, and I was really inspired by, quite frankly, just real life. Creatures that mate and that are in a weakened state afterwards, and they kill the male or the other mate, or however that happens. It's just kind of neat, and I get a lot of these ideas by watching documentaries about, our world, about our nature, and I think that's really cool. There's some really neat stuff in nature documentaries, but also too, all these different books, movies, and TV shows. There's so much material out there for you to work with. There's no reason why you couldn't run a game every single day and never run out of material. Now, you might run out of enthusiasm, and I got to tell you, I have ran out of enthusiasm on plenty of occasions. But all you got to do is get a good rest, get some food in you, give yourself a few days or a week off from the game to get recharged, and you'll be back in it in no time. So I'm going to end that right there about brainstorming campaign ideas. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Dave Hunt, owner of GameMasters Guild, telling you to stay safe, play great games, and I'll see you real soon.